So tonight, we're prepping for St. Patrick's Day. This is Whiskey Row. We don't drink green beer, we drink whiskey. That's what this is all about, Irish whiskey. And tonight, we're diving into Irish whiskey, and I'm gonna help you find out what you should be drinking on St. Patrick's Day. So first off, what is Irish whiskey? Well, Irish whiskey, as you may have guessed, is whiskey that comes from Ireland. That's pretty much it. Technically 4 types. 3 of those are what you would normally buy and drink. The other is really not sold, and it's used to produce one of the types. So the first type of Irish whiskey is single malt Irish whiskey, and it's very similar to what you'd think of as a single malt Scotch. There's very little difference other than one is made in Scotland, one is made in Ireland. In Scotland, it's very common for single malts to be peated, where they actually add peat into the process to give it that peated flavor. That's very, very uncommon in Irish whiskey, but there are a few, but it's very, very uncommon. So the second type of Irish whiskey is pot still whiskey, or single pot still whiskey. That's very, very similar process-wise to what you would think of from any kind of a pot still whiskey. It has some of those pot still whiskey characteristics that's pretty common amongst any distiller who uses that method or that type of still. So the third type of Irish whiskey is grain Irish whiskey. And really, they only make that to put in blends. They don't really sell that. That's not something that you would go into a bar or a package store or a liquor store and buy. You wouldn't buy a grain Irish whiskey. But what they do is they'll use either the single malt Irish whiskey or the pot still Irish whiskey, and they'll blend that with grain whiskey to make a blended Irish whiskey. Now that we have some of the basics of Irish whiskey, why are we talking about it? Well, St. Patrick's Day is coming up. I've had a couple of people request a video about Irish whiskey, so I thought we'd dive into it. We'd learn a little bit more about it. So we're going to quickly go through all of these here. We're going to put them into categories after we introduce them, and then we're going to go from there to figure out different flavors and a little bit of that stuff. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Red Spot single pot Irish whiskey. This is a 15-year. It's triple aged in bourbon, sherry, and marsala casks. It's got a really good berry flavor. I've drunk a little bit of this. I've talked about it on the channel. I do really enjoy this. This runs you about $120, and we're going to put it over here with pot stills. The Green Spot, which is the little brother of the Red Spot, it's aged for, I believe, around 6 years. I'm not sure if it's age stated or not, but it's about 6 years. It's a single pot still. It runs for about $51. I got it here in Virginia. I haven't even opened this yet. Next up is Nappagee Castle. It is a 12-year single malt. So again, this is a more scotchy tasting than the pot stills. So we're going to put that over here. I paid $39 for this here in Virginia. The Yellow Spot, again, it's a single pot still. Runs for about $95, so it's on the spendy side. So next up is Powers Gold Label. It's a blend. It's triple distilled and runs for about $29. So we'll put the blends right here in the middle. So we've got the single malts, the single pot stills, and the blends. Jameson Black Barrel. So this is the more expensive version of a standard Jameson. So it runs for about $39. It's triple distilled as well, but it's also a blend. Regular Jamesons that you would normally think of when you think of Jamesons runs for about $26. Again, it's a triple distilled blend. In this short, squat, little crazy looking bottle is called Sexton. It's a single malt, runs for $33. So we'll put that over here with the single malts. So next up is an Irish whiskey called the Quiet Man. It's actually a blend that they then age in bourbon barrels. Pretty interesting, for $34. In this really pretty bottle is Drumshambo. It runs for $59 here, and it is a single pot still. So next up is the Teeling Small Batch. This is aged in rum and bourbon casks. I actually don't know if it's considered a pot still, a blend, or a single malt. It's got some really good reviews, and I'm looking forward to it. It runs for about $39. So next up, we have Tullamore Dew 12-year. This is a blend, aged 12 years, runs for about $44 here in Virginia. It is aged in old oak casks as well as sherry cask. So lastly, we have the RedBreast 12. It's a 12-year age-stated $61 triple distilled Irish whiskey that is a single pot still. With this Teeling, the best way to tell if it's a single malt or a pot still or a blend is to taste it. Scientifically, that's not accurate, but I'm going to do it because I can. So after tasting the Teeling, I actually can't tell what it is. So now I'm having to taste everything. So this is the Napa Ghee. Let me try the Drum Frambow. Whoa, I poured all over the table. To me, this tastes like a pot still, so I'm going to assume it's a pot still. So there's a long history of making whiskey in Ireland. At one point around the turn of the century, it got down to just a handful of distilleries. Now it's back up into the around 30 or so. Just as we've seen this, explosion of popularity in bourbon and rye whiskey, there's been an explosion in Irish as well. Not as big, but it's definitely grown a lot. Now we're going to kind of do some random samples just to figure out some characteristics between the different types. So first, let's start with the Napa Ghee Castle. Again, this is a 12-year single malt. So it's going to taste a little like a Scotch, kind of like a Speyside. So it does smell like you would think of a Speyside Scotch. I don't know how to describe flavors in Scotch like I do with bourbon. Bourbon I've been able to learn, but I'm newer to the Scotch world and definitely need some more experience in picking up some of those distinct flavor characteristics. As a bourbon guy, I do get a hint of fruit. There's this underlying chemical smell to it that's a little bit different that I'm not used to from a bourbon perspective, even though I like Scotch. So there's a bit of sweetness to it. It's just a little bit of some dried fruit maybe. It doesn't have any kind of a spiciness to it though. There's a good smoky characteristic. It's pleasant. As a bourbon guy, it tastes like Scotch. It's good though. It's enjoyable, and at $40 compared to some of the Scotch prices, it's potentially a pretty good option. Let's do the Jameson Black Barrel because I've had it before and that's actually pretty good at $40. Again, this is $40, and I'll probably try to stick around $40 over here. So this is a blend. The nice thing about blends is the flavor consistency. So this has a lot of an oak barrelness to it. And as a bourbon person, I kind of gravitate to this. That's really good. You get some of that charred oak barrelness. There's some good thick sweetness to it. The Black Barrel, I think the biggest difference between a regular Jameson's and this one is you do get more barrel characteristic. You get that charred, and it brings in some more sweetness. If you're a bourbon guy, this is a good Irish option for St. Patrick's Day. Now the pot stills, on the other hand, 33, 39, 29, 34, 39, 26, 44, 39, 59, 61, 51, 95, 120. So the single pot still ones are more expensive, and I don't know if that's because that's just what I bought, or maybe that's just a characteristic of single pot still Irish whiskey. I would use the Teeling at 39, but I'm not 100% sure that this is a single pot still. So I'm going to actually open up the Green Spot because it's the next cheapest alternative at 51. So Green Spot, as the cheapest spot, still has a really good reputation. Come on, Green Spot. Getting apples, a little bit of sweetness and fruitiness. So right up front, you can immediately tell it's a pot still. It's got a little bit of spice up front. There's a faint appleness to it, along with a good sweetness. As an American whiskey guy, the Green Spot's good. It's sweet, and it has a good experience, good flavor profile, everything that you would want. But I think the Jameson's Black Barrel definitely kind of stood out more as a bourbon person's Irish whiskey. We've learned that there's several different types of Irish whiskey, and they're quite a bit different in flavor. You have your single malts, which are much more like a Scotch. You have your blends, maybe not necessarily a special, but still really good. And then you have your single pot stills. Between now and the next video I do on Irish whiskey, I'm going to drink each of these. I'm going to spend some time with them, get to know them a little bit, and then I'm going to narrow it down to 5. And those will be my top 5. And then from those top 5s, we'll do a blind taste and figure out what my #1 recommendation is for you to drink on St. Patrick's Day. If you enjoy the channel, please subscribe. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. And until next time, find a bottle you love. I did hear a myth that the Irish whiskey will protect you from leprechauns. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that terrible 80s horror movie about a leprechaun. It's a masterpiece of cinematography and filmmaking. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. And when you do, definitely drink Irish whiskey because it does help the experience. Don't ever say I didn't teach you guys anything.